computer. Okay. I am really excited that we are doing this program, and I'm excited because we have such wonderful presenters and because of what we have to discuss. Our first two presenters are Hedy Pizer and Andy Siegel. Hedy Pizer brings a lifetime of social work and educational experience to our discussion today. She's been chairman of the board of the Yeshiva High School of Greater Washington and has taught in the sociology department at American University. For 43 years, she was a director of volunteers for Charles E. Smith Life Communities. And that means she was responsible for the overall supervision of more than 2,000 volunteers, including teenagers, mothers with young children, volunteers with special needs, as well as seniors. Among the many awards she received, her work on the Ethical Wills Project was singled out in 2009 for outstanding programming. And we're happy to call Hedy Pizer one of our own. She's a long-time Kemp Mill. And let me introduce Andy Siegel as well. Please, if you are not muted, please mute. Jocelyn, please mute. Andy Siegel. Okay, you good? Thank you. Andy Siegel is the Chief Business Development Officer for Goodwin Houses, a senior housing and healthcare organization in Virginia. His expertise and his major focus is on providing high quality medical services to older adults in their own homes, allowing them to age in place. And I was delighted to see that because, of course, that is part of our mission statement of the Kemp Mill Village, to help people age in place. He's adjunct faculty and a lead instructor for the post-acute care management curriculum in the Department of Health Policy and Management, the Milken Institute School of Public Health at the George Washington University. And so please, Hedy and Andy, take it away. You can start sharing screen whenever you're ready. Welcome.
Okay, I'm ready. Okay. I am a direct descendant of the Shlah HaKadosh, who is known as Isaiah Horowitz, and he wrote Shnei Luchot HaBrit. We're talking about the year 1600, and it's basically a discussion on ethical wills. And then that one day I read a book about him, and then I dreamt about him. And the next morning, I decided that we were going to have the residents at the Hebrew home write ethical wills. Okay. Then I get a phone call that day from Josh Stanton. He wanted to do oral histories. So I said, let's sit down and talk. And we did. And we met, and I told him about my idea about the Ethical Will Project, and he was delighted. And we developed 22 questions and a training program. And we recruited and trained 36 high school and college students. And each student had to write their own ethical will. Among our recruits was 14-year-old Andy Siegel. His work was so fantastic that I had him do my husband's ethical will. At that time, my husband was in the short-term rehab unit at the Hebrew home. And then he became our senior outreach and student coordinator.
It's your life is, I forget what it's ethical.
All right. He stood out, and he was so phenomenal that even his rabbi said he is simply one in a million. Now, what is an ethical will? It's basically, what have you learned from life and want to share with your family and friends? It's like a love letter to your family. It passes on words of wisdom from one generation to the next. Working on this project had a great impact on many of our students. One became a rabbi, another a doctor, and Andy gets his MBA in healthcare and is currently, as you know, the Chief Development Officer at Goodwin House. And I'd now like to introduce Andy Siegel, who did a phenomenal job with the ethical wills in interviewing. And I do want you to know that when my husband passed away, I read part of what Eddie had written for my husband when I delivered the eulogy. Okay, Andy?
Thank you, Hedy. This is a really exciting opportunity, and wonderful to see some faces and more names on the screen. I'd like to do whatever would be most beneficial for this group. I'd be happy to go over what an ethical will is, how they're written. If there are those of you who are interested in certain aspects, how to write your own, or how to get involved, we can talk about that. If you're interested in some of the impacts organizationally that ethical wills had on the Charles E. Smith Life communities when Hedy and I worked there together, I'd be happy to talk about that. But perhaps Beverly was nodding that perhaps I'll start off with what an ethical will is and kind of the impact that it had on the residents and a little bit of context for how it started at the Hebrew home, which is part of the Charles E. Smith Life communities. If that works for you all, does that sound good? So the Charles E. Smith Life communities are some of you familiar with the organization Rockville, Maryland, the Hebrew home. It's a full continuum, independent living, assisted living, long-term care, nursing, memory care in Rockville, Maryland. Has about 1,200 residents. And the program that Hedy ran was in many ways a national example of a volunteer program. Most organizations around the country don't have a robust volunteer program that's as large as the staff itself. And what that enabled was for really enhanced services for the residents, engagement, which is one of the key reasons why folks choose to live in a community-based care setting. And so the Ethical Wills program allowed volunteers of all ages to learn from the residents who live there, to have a higher level of interaction with the folks who they were writing the ethical wills for. An ethical will is not an oral history, although similar. It's not just the stories themselves, but it's what you learn from those stories, your life lessons, your regrets, your values, your beliefs. And what we found from writing these documents or recording the videos, however they ended up materializing, was that the folks who were doing the interviewing oftentimes learned more from the experience at the Hebrew home under this program than they did from whatever academic experience they were in the middle of. So that whether they were in high school or college or whether they were my 94-year-old volunteer who I had at the time, we had all ages writing ethical wills. Everyone was able to learn from your generation of Holocaust survivors, your generation of World War II veterans, immigrants, and what you learned and what were the critical values that were your North Star that helped guide through life. And I certainly found that as a 14-year-old writing my ethical will, that a lot of the things I was experiencing on a day-to-day basis ended up feeling less important because I had a context for how life could truly be lived if it was a really rich life. And I learned that from spending so much time with these older adults at the Hebrew home. And so I'll go through, I think perhaps I'll go through some of the presentation that we shared when we were training people on how to write an ethical will, because it will give you insight into what we look for, what we talk about, and how the ethical wills are written. Anybody have any questions so far? Anybody heard of an ethical will before? In what context? Does anybody want to share, Chris?
I've just read about it in several different books, and it's always appealed to me because it, for the reasons that you and Hedy have outlined, I don't know much about them, but they sound wonderful. I mean, the idea of passing on your lessons, life lessons to future generations just makes enormous sense. One thing I didn't understand, though, is Hedy saying that you had written her late husband's ethical will. Surely everyone has to write their own ethical will. Is it possible for you to write someone else's ethical will? I didn't get that.
Well, so there's you have your living will, which is and you have your advance directive. So you have all these legal documents, and the majority of the world's population, we wait till the last possible second to do any of them, right? And perhaps even when they're too late. And so an ethical will is not a legal document at all. And so we and I'll go through the questions because perhaps it'll be helpful. You'll be able to see exactly what it is. But my experience, the privilege that I had with Rabbi Pizer was a real privilege for me. Because Hedy was my boss at the time. But I remember with the rabbi sharing, we sat down and we spent some time together. And after about an hour and a half, Hedy, I think I came to your office and I told you the story that after an hour and a half, there's 22 questions on the ethical will. And after an hour and a half, I said, well, we're going to move to question number 2 now. And he said, well, you've already asked me 22 questions. Aren't we done? And that was the whole, that's an ethical will done right. And a conversation, it speaks to Rabbi Pizer, of course, because he had so much wisdom to share, but it also speaks to how rich these documents can be, because it truly is a conversation. Tell me about your life. What was most important to you? If you had to do it over again to a young person, what would you suggest that they look for? What would you suggest that they pay attention to? And so that was my experience with the rabbi. And then it's not uncommon that the family members learn things about their loved ones from reading these documents, because I was an objective party. I had no judgment, and I was just there to learn from him and his wisdom. And so, interestingly enough, we as trainers, Hedy, Josh, and I, it wasn't mandated that these documents got shared with family. Actually, the person who wrote, whose ethical will it was, got to choose who they shared it with. And there were certain occasions where people just wanted to keep it in a drawer. It was their opportunity to get certain things off their chest. It was their opportunity to share. But they didn't necessarily want everyone to know. And that was the real value of the program that Hedy built, was so many resources to residents that they otherwise would not have gotten.
Let me add something to that. I think, Chris, based on your question, and that is that Andy would go home and then put all the information on his computer and then print it out. So that's what we meant by he wrote the ethical will. But basically, he used everything that my husband, let's say in this case, my husband said, he wrote down. Let me also add that we had a wonderful affair involving the residents and their family members, that we had an evening of tribute to the residents, and they gave their children a copy of their ethical will at that event. So I just wanted to share that as well. Okay, Andy.
Thank you, Hedy.
I have a question.
Yes, please.
In the past, we've had great rabbis who've written letters to their children. I can't remember the names of them, but there have been 2 or 3 major documents like that. Would you consider, if you're familiar with them at all, would you consider them a form of ethical will?
That's a wonderful question. I think absolutely that we created a template. We called the program Lessons of a Lifetime. We created a template that was really just a vehicle. It was a tool for the ethical will to be written, but certainly a letter, or there were certain residents, folks I worked with, who actually there was one question that just really got them thinking, and we only answered one question. because that was for them, it was the catalyst for a lot of life experience, a lot of life reflection. And so we had a whole multi-hour discussion, multi-visit discussion based off of one question. And there was research that Hedy and Josh conducted, and that required answering all the questions, and there were certain criteria around the research. But in terms of just what an ethical will is, that's exactly, it could be a letter, absolutely.
But Andy, to kind of build on what you're saying, when I get into my talk that talks about goodbye letters is one of the things I'll talk about, and it'll kind of build on what you all are talking about with the ethical will. I'll give some examples to really answer the gentleman's question in a little bit of a different fashion.
Wonderful, wonderful. Any other questions before I think I'm going to actually share with you the questions so that you can see them before I share anything else. This is, let's see if I do this right here. Can everyone see the questions? Is that what you see, a Word document?
Yes.
Wonderful. So.
Little small.
It's small.
Perhaps you can read them.
Yeah, sure. So what values and beliefs are important to you and to pass on to the others? This is question number one. Number two, what are your spiritual beliefs? Number three, do you have children? What thoughts would you like to pass to your children and grandchildren? If no children, what thoughts would you like to pass down to others? What books or films were most influential to you? What did they teach you? Words of wisdom, what advice would you offer other people about living their lives? Or what words of wisdom do you wish to impart to the next generation? Is there anything in your life that you want others to know about? This is a gift to your family. What have you learned from your life experiences that you can share with us? Are there any particular experiences that you wish to share with your family or friends? Why did you choose these ones out of your many memories? What have those experiences taught you? And that's one question. Have you ever had a life-altering experience, or was there an event that changed your life that you can share with us? How did this event affect you? Was this the most significant moment of your life? What was the most meaningful event in your life? Was it the result of a great deal of work? Did it change the way you view the world? What has made your life worth living? Was it a particular relationship, your work, or a group you were part of? Did you have dreams when you were young that you didn't fulfill? What have you learned? Have you learned something from your parents or grandparents that you wish to share with your children or others? Who is or was the most important person in your life, and what did you learn from that person? Were there any others who greatly impacted your life? What did they do or say? Is there something that you are grateful for? Do you have regrets of something that you did not do or something that you did? What are the things in your life that you're most proud of? What was the hardest decision that you ever made? What hopes and dreams do you have for your loved ones? Is there anything in your life that you should have done differently? If you could change one thing in the world, what would it be, and how would you change it? And if you had only 1 year left to live, what would you do? And you'll notice there's some redundancy in the questions there. And that was intentional, because sometimes when you ask a question a certain way, it'll trigger a certain response. And if you ask it a different way, it'll trigger a different response. And we, as part of the training, we trained our interviewers, on how to deviate from the script if necessary. If they had already asked a question, there's no perhaps you don't ask them 4 more times. But oftentimes we would find that people would try to be very prescriptive in how they'd answer things. And just by going through the questions, we were able to trigger some really rich responses.
Andy, let me add to that we interviewed a elderly retired college professor who said the following, and I quote, "No one ever asked me such meaningful questions about my life." And he was absolutely delighted to be a participant in this project because of that.
And I remember as a 14-year-old not wanting to ask that last question, if you had 1 year left to live, what would you do? Because I had, by the time I had gotten to question 22, I had built such a long relationship, felt like a rich relationship with these people. And then all of a sudden I was asking them about their death. And I remember talking to Hedy about it, and Hedy feeling fairly strongly that I needed to ask the question. And I'll share that it was liberating for a lot of people to have that question asked. Hedy was right that folks really felt like they had an opportunity to share things that if you think about it intuitively, it makes sense. The people who would ask you, who would want to know those things, or who would ask you that question, family, close relatives, would never want to frame your death for you. But certainly if you live in a community-based setting like that, it's not uncommon. We find it within my organization and our communities that we run. It's absolutely natural for people to think about these things, but without the opportunity to talk about them, it can be really liberating to have that question asked.
Let me also add that I would encourage your families to have your high school and college students and grandchildren do the interviews and to interview their grandparents, to interview you. It will be a most fantastic experience, meaningful experience for both generations.
Do you think the last question is like a bucket list?
It can be anything. I certainly had a lot of answers about travel, a lot of bucket list like things that folks sometimes had planned to do and sometimes hadn't planned to do. And then you had your answers that were I'd continue to validating what they have already chosen as their path. I would continue to spend holidays with my family and as much time. I would continue not to work like I did for all those years without noticing that life just blew by. And so oftentimes kind of an affirmation that I'm making the right decision, or a check. Interesting. If I had 1 year left to live, am I doing what I would want to do? And an opportunity to validate whether you're living that life in accordance with your values. Yeah, Chris, please.
I think the 22 questions are wonderful. And I can think of a 23rd question, if you like, which is, what is your legacy, or what would you like your legacy to be? Another point I want to make is on question number 22, about people's reluctance to talk about that. I mean, that's just a reflection of how death and dying is taboo, is a subject that we don't talk about enough. And I think we need to overcome that, and we need to talk about it. And then the last point I want to make is that the wonderful thing about an ethical will is it gives you a chance to ruminate, to talk about deep questions, things that matter to you deeply, and in doing that, to build community ties, to build a sense of togetherness. And I just think that is a wonderful benefit of ethical, was apart from having the ethical itself and passing it on to your progeny, the very fact of doing it and building community, I think, is very important.
Absolutely. Very interested in your thoughts about your legacy question, and how you think, if you were to think of people you would interview or yourself, how you might approach answering that question. Would it be a theme? What is that trigger that you think?
I think in a way it's tautological. We're going in a bit of a circle because I think the ethical will is asking that question, and the ethical will is part of your legacy. So the question, what is your legacy? You could answer it tautologically by saying, well, it's my ethical will. But I think to answer your question, Andy, to be more direct about it, I think everyone's going to answer that in a different way. Some people will answer in terms of the values they want to convey to their grandchildren. Others will answer it in terms of books they've written. Others will answer it in terms of work they've done and so on. So I think everyone's will be different. And I think an ethical will and the legacy are very much tied together. They are, if you like, overlapping. And by the way, I wonder, Barbara or Andy or Hedy, would it be possible for you to send us those 22 questions? I'd love to have a copy of those 22 questions if you wouldn't mind sending that to us.
It's on the website. It's on the Kemp Mill Village website.
And well, I'm a member of the Bethesda Metro Area Village, not this one. So will I still be able to access it?
If you could send me an email, and I'll be happy to send it to you.
Great, thanks so much.
Absolutely.
Also, when we sent you the Zoom link,
Yep.
if you go all the way to the bottom of that email, documents are attached.
My apologies.
So a lot of people don't go to the bottom. None of us go to the bottom of messages anymore.
No.
I did actually send a note after the Zoom link saying, and there are 2 attachments out.
Yeah.
My apologies. It just shows what a moron I am.
Not at all.
No, we've all been through this, between the Zoom links and emails and all that we've been through this year. Yeah. Do we have any other
Back
questions?
on the question on ethical wills. We oftentimes, when I went to college, I created a program with universities and local senior living communities to partner to write these ethical wills. Through the program with Hedy, we partnered with a lot of high schools. Really a heavy intergenerational component to it, and so we encourage everybody to work with family, work with local organizations to write these, or to start thinking through these questions yourself. Certainly impacted the way that the lens in which I view my life.
In fact, Andy started an ethical will club at the Jewish Day School, if I remember correctly, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
When your list of 22 fills more than a page of type. When I listened to some of the questions, it seemed to me that my answers to any one of them might very well fill several pages. So therefore, my question comes down, what do you think the normative size of an ethical will would be? I mean, would it be 1 page? Would it be 10 pages? Would it be, say, 30 pages? I'm hoping you give me the answer like 4, but this because just the questions are, or do you think that when you write it, you do a lot of editing? You spend a lot of time generating all these things, and then do you spend a lot of time then compacting them into a more cogent statement that takes 4 pages instead of 30?
Well, it's a good question, and it's a fine balance, because the goal as the scribe, the interviewer, is both to help guide the thoughts and make sure that they're they fall within one of the categories, and if not, do add a separate category at the end, but also to have the voice of the person you're interviewing. And so when I did bring it to the Jewish Day School, I struggled because folks were getting community service hours for it. And so that was really wonderful. but they wanted to, some people wanted to check the box. And so instead of telling the whole story, they'd cut to the chase. But it's the story that has the richness, right? And so you want to make sure you can articulate the voice, even some of the words. I mean, Chris, if we could get your accent on paper, we would. And that was part of what made these documents so rich and beautiful. And you work with a resident who's lived in a nursing home for 7 years or more, and they don't have a lot of human interaction other than their caregivers. They're going to do a lot of talking, and they may repeat themselves, and they may go off into discussions about areas that are not to be included in the ethical will. They're not relevant, or perhaps it's about day to day, and it's not something that would merit the scribe of an ethical will. And so part of the training was, sometimes when people started talking about lunch, you put the pen down and you talk about lunch with them as the volunteer, because that's what life's all about. But the ethical will writing time is done because you've already asked 4 questions about someone's 85-year-old life. And that can take some time and some emotional bandwidth. And so that's part of the richness. But, really to answer your question, I had ethical wills that were the same length as the questions themselves, 2 sentences apiece. And perhaps those were folks who weren't ready or who were really concise. And then we had ethical wills that were dozens of pages. And I think that speaks to how people live their lives, right? You have people who live their life in 40 pages, and you have people who live their life in 3 pages, and you can't judge one versus the other. We're all so different.
I know there's a friend of ours in this neighborhood. That was probably the first I had heard of an ethical will. He has either his grandfather's or great grandfather's ethical will, and he's actually got it. Anytime you go visit this family, he will take it off the wall and he will talk to you about the ethical will. It is something that is extremely powerful and extremely important to him and to his family. And it's something that he's shared with his own kids and his grandkids now. It is just, there's a centrality to it that has really shaped his life. And when we think about doing this, it is, you can't even imagine the ramifications, how it will then, how it will be passed along from generation to generation. So it's really kind of neat. It really is.
Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
Oh, I just want to endorse what Barbara just said, and to add that, and this has shown up in your life, Andy, already, to add that doing an ethical will isn't just for older people. And I mean, I think, Andy, if I've understood your story correctly from Hedy, that you wrote one when you were a teenager. And I think that's very good. And I think it can really help young people, help them get perspective, help them grow up, help them mature to grapple with those 22 questions. So it's not just for older people.
Absolutely. I mean, having to answer the question as a early teenager, what values and beliefs are important to you and to pass on to others.
Yeah.
Well, it gets your mind past recess a little bit, and then you think about that. Then it's there. Then it exists.
And the other point I'd make is that, ethical wills, it sort of fits beautifully into other things like a personal mission statement. If you've got a personal mission statement as advocated by the late Stephen Covey, that doesn't take a lot to transform that into an ethical will. And then a goodbye letter. Stanford University, as I'm sure you know, has pioneered the use of what they call goodbye letters, where you write a letter to your children, telling them how much you love them, what they mean to you. And that is not dissimilar from an ethical will. And some people write in fact, I do this, toast letters where you write to people who you care about and toast them and tell them why you love them, what they mean to you. And you do this before dementia hits. You do this when you're not too old, so that you are able to, put pen to paper. If you leave it, I'm just not a big believer in deathbed conversations. I mean, it's too late.
Absolutely.
A lot of people were able to answer the questions with one sentence. Some of them actually took 2 sentences, and some took pages. So it really, a lot of it is a very personal situation, and it varies from individual to individual.
I was struck by something that Andy said, which was that yes, like as a high school kid, that you were sitting, you had to stop, if the 85-year-old person that you're talking to wants to talk about lunch, and stop and say, okay, and not be impatient. It's a way to teach that kind of patience. And I think that's what Chris is talking about in terms of maturation. It's really important to have the sense that people who are older than you have something to say, and that you're listening, and that there's a value, and that you can be patient about it because you're taking the time. And when you're 14 or 15 years old, you really want to, it's hard, but it's an important skill to start learning at that stage. Yeah. And by the way, the goodbye letter, Chris, is the other document we have attached.
Oh, okay, great.
Beverly is going to talk about today. So
Wonderful.
You hit it right on the head.
Wonderful, yeah.
If we're ready, we could pass along then to Beverly, and I'm happy to introduce her.
But let me just, before you do that,
Absolutely.
Andy or Hedy, are there any other remarks or closing or anything you want to do before we hand off, or don't want to jump in too soon?
And if there are any questions that anybody has, please put them in the chat, because we can come back to this discussion after after Bev's presentation as well. So I'll be happy to monitor the chat and to take questions.
Chris.
I just want to add to what Barbara said. I just think this process of having young people, help older people write their ethical wills is just a wonderful thing. I'm repeating what Barbara said, but I just want to add as well that it's also a way to help combat ageism and the disrespect that in the West, at least, people hold older people. When younger people can spend time with older people and see that they have something worthwhile to say, that is a good thing. That's helps to combat the sickness of ageism we have in our society.
Absolutely. I guess I'll close with that, Chris, that the Ethical Will program and Hedy's leadership at a really young age gave me a sense of purpose that I didn't expect to find working at what I perceived when I walked in the door as a nursing home. And I think that you're right that we don't understand older adults in this country and in the West, as you put it, as the wise folks who have done it, and how we can learn from them. And this many years later, still committed to older adults in that field. I'm responsible for an organization that takes care of 3,000 older adults a day, and wouldn't have known how to do that or have that sense of purpose if I hadn't had the opportunity to write these ethical wills when I was in middle school. And so it was a real privilege, and thank you all for taking the time to learn from what is Hedy's leadership for so many years.
Any final call?
Hedy?
I thank you for the opportunity to share what we have learned from life, and hopefully our viewers will encourage their children and grandchildren to do the interviews and interview themselves so to speak. And I think everyone will gain from it. And I really found the questions that were asked today fantastic. And it's a fascinating area, by the way. Just absolutely. We documented the responses of the residents, and it's fascinating just to read it. So how different people at different ages responded to the same question. Quite a difference, but everyone can learn from everyone else. And I thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you both. All right. So we have, as I say, it's a good segue because Chris mentions goodbye letters. And Beverly Moss is going to present the our program on how to write your memoirs, and how to, again, it's very much related. And as I've gotten to know Bev, I know that if anybody should write a memoir to share with family and friends, it's she was raised in Medford, Massachusetts, studied fine arts and sculpture at Boston University. Following her undergraduate degree, she held numerous managerial positions in the Washington, D.C. area. And as a senior management consultant for more than 10 years, she worked on organizational change with leaders of private companies such as MetLife, Nike, Hyatt Hotels, L'Oreal, and Lockheed Martin, as well as, again, a number of government agencies. And now she's retired, Beverly continues to pursue her artistic talents. She participates in a small writing group where she writes essays, poetry, and children's stories. And her work is in the tree anthology publication created by the Dearborn, Michigan Library, and essays for the Montgomery Parks in Arts program. Plus, she's always doing some kind of craft project. She makes one-of-a-kind jewelry and mixed media drawings, among other things. And we're very happy that she decided to put down roots in Kemp Mill.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Barbara. And again, how do I share my screen? Have I just click it, or what? There's nothing dropping down?
That's right. You can go. You should go to share a screen. Uh-oh. Yeah, because it's on. So you should be able, you should be able to share a screen.
Okay. All right. So maybe it's the view I'm in, because I'll try this and see if I get. I'm not getting a, at the top, you usually can get share your screen.
Yeah, let me see. Maybe if I.
It's usually Bev at the bottom.
At the bottom.
It's a green screen at the very
There,
bottom.
got it.
You got it?
Thank you.
Okay.
All right, share my screen. That's what I want. So you'll come on. Share.
Everybody,
Okay.
we see you.
And you're on.
And I'm on. All right, from the beginning. I can get it to my computer is so slow. Start already.
Okay.
Okay, there we go. All right. So again, my program really does dovetail so nicely with Hedy and Andy's presentation, but I'm kind of talk a little bit about sharing your life story. And I'm going to focus on three different things: your memoirs, your life reviews, and the goodbye letters that Chris talked about earlier. So when we talk about what is a memoir, it really is that historical account or biography, and it's written from your personal knowledge and so forth. It's a book about your life and your lessons. And again, the questions that Andy had really helped form that memoir if you wanted to be something a little more formal. It focuses and reflects on the relationships between you as the writer and a person, place, time, object, and explains the significance of that relationship. It's typically limited to a particular phase, time, period, place, or recurring behaviors, just so it's not, I was born on a Tuesday, and, you can go down into the weeds. So typically a memoir segments some section of your life that you would like to share with others. When you're thinking about planning it, what are you going to cover? Are you going to start your high school years? Are you going to talk about, your life in business? You're going to talk about, your relationship with your family, and you start crafting that story from beginning, middle, and your highlights. So figure, what do I want to focus on? Because it can get into, if you don't, it can get into, well, I went shopping on Tuesday and I picked up lemons, and I went to the grocery store on Friday and picked up something else. You got to be able to really think about what are the key things you want to share. And think about how you want it to end. It might be where you got the big promotion, or you moved to Milwaukee, or your first child was born, or something like that. So think about where you want to end your story. And it is about you. A memoir is about you, not necessarily about, you know, your parents or another loved one. And really think about that ending. That's really key, is you want to end with a bang if possible. So there are pros and cons when you're thinking about writing your memoirs. So it is about, on the positive side, sharing that significant part, coming to terms with your identity. Who are you? What makes you you? How do you, again, back to what Hedy and Andy were saying, leaving a legacy of generational connectivity? Because again, your kids only look at you from, that's my mother, that's my grandmother. They don't necessarily recognize you as a person. You just were automatically their parent, but you had a life oftentimes very rich before they were on the scene. Unless your personality shine and you find, recall, and document some of the meaning of your life, and it's never too late to start. You can, or too early to start. Back to what Chris was saying earlier, you can start writing these things today. I mean, you know, you think about these Olympic athletes, for example. They're young people, but they've got a lot to share and tell about the things they've gone through, even if they're only in their late 20s or early 30s. However, there are some things to consider when you think about trying to do a memoir. You might say to yourself, you know, everybody writing this thing, you know, I can't think of anything worth saying, or it's already been written. You know, Hemingway wrote a memoir, and how can I compete with that? It may be uncomfortable for you or unflattering to others, so be aware of that. You might still have to write it, but just be aware that sometimes something you say might be uncomfortable or challenging for others. And it takes more time than you think. Back to the gentleman's question earlier, I think it was Elliot, who said, you know, how long should it take or how many pages? It might be bigger than you think, but sometimes they can be short and sweet and more like a short story. So your memoirs are, you know, a little bit more of an in-depth document. And here are some examples of ones that are real popular to give you an idea. You know, the Eat, Pray, Love, which was turned into the movie, or Angela's Ashes, or any of these along here. And there are a bunch of memoirs that you can think of. I wanted to give people an idea. Usually a memoir is something a little more hefty, a little bigger kind of a document than some of the other things we were talking about earlier. So that's kind of, you know, the memoir thing. We're not going to be able to go into, you know, write this, say this, but just give you a framework of how and what a memoir is and what it can do. Before I go, let me go back a minute. Before I change subjects, any questions on memoirs before we go to our next section on life reviews? Oh, okay. If not, moving on. Life reviews use a series of prompts or questions, again, like what Hedy was talking about earlier, that sum up what you know, have experienced, accomplished, and so forth. It's sharing a lot of the laughs, tears, and lessons learned, hopes, dreams that you've had, and it affirms that your life had purpose and value and helps you and helps others appreciate how and why you became you. The set of questions in a life review really do help you provide structure, because otherwise you can get way off or not off enough. It cannot be, sometimes you're not going deep enough. So the life review, very much like the ethical questions, ethical will give you that structure so you can capture some of those key things. You makes a process of recounting stories and acquired wisdom more pleasurable and meaningful. And there are no right or wrong answers. Everyone's life is different. The choices you make felt right at the time, or you learned a lesson when that decision didn't turn out like you had hoped. And it helps, as I said earlier, helps others know you beyond your role as a parent, grandparent, sibling, or friend. Many people don't know the deep person inside of us or the things that matter to us along the way. When you're planning it out, start with who you are for the record. Your name, rank, and serial number, as they used to say. Many times, your children or your grandchildren don't know who their great grandparents are. You might know that, and you might be the last person in the family who knows who came before. I wish I had some of the information from my mother, for example, on her grandparents. She's gone now. It's too late. And there's no one left in the family that has that information. Add some fun facts. Like, what was your favorite holiday? What's your favorite season? The vacation that meant the most to you. Your first pet. I mean, all those kind of things are part of the life review that people get to know you beyond, again, you're my Nana, that kind of thing. Other topics that you can include, and this is, again, all of these will be on the website. Early days, your love and friendships, recalling those you love or loved and who made a difference in your life. Some laughs and smiles, the good times that you shared. Your values and beliefs, truths that you hold dear. Again, Hedy talked about this and Andy talked about this. With what is important to you? What are your values? What are your beliefs? Your courageousness. When were you brave? That can be an important lesson to share with younger people in your family. You could say, I was scared when I moved from Massachusetts to DC. I didn't know a lot of people here, but I was brave and took the chance. And this is what resulted in doing that. So that helps sometimes younger people say, maybe I can take a chance too on something I'm a little nervous about. Your achievements, triumphs, and perseverance, your successes, your strengths. I'm a powerful person. I'm active. I'm whatever. And then your hopes and dreams. Again, building on the ethical will, what you would still want for yourself and others in your life. And again, pros and cons. Pros of a life review provides the format, reminds you of who you were then and are now, because sometimes our youthful person and the person we are today can be very different. Oftentimes a very shy person turns out to be a rabble rouser as they get to be 65 plus, and they've dyed their hair purple and they're, have tattoos all over their body. You don't know. It reminds you of who you were. It brings back those lost memories and takes a deeper dive into who you are, how you became you. It enables others to know you beyond the surface. Of course, might be some things to consider. It might be overwhelming with too many areas to explore. Like, okay, I have to remember all of the pets I've had. I can't remember that. That could be overwhelming. Or how many times I've moved, or those kinds of things. And it could bring back something that could be painful or unresolved for you personally, or within your family, or within your circle of friends. You may share more than others, more about you that others want to know. This can be dicey because sometimes people write life reviews or memoirs and they get into the nitty gritty of things that they have done, and people can be like, wow, that person was out there. So just be aware, you can always do it. That might be, some things that you want to think about. And again, back to like we said before, might reveal things about others that they didn't want shared. And it could possibly, in some of these reviews, if it gets too detailed or brings up some things unresolved, can be a family issue and cause some problems. So just, again, things to just keep in mind around life reviews. Here are some sample questions that I pulled together for you. What was your first job? My favorite singer or movie star will always be such and such. This was the silliest, most foolish moment in my life. My favorite season of the year is because whatever. And then again, we talked about hopes and wishes you would like to have to come true for the people you love. So just some idea of some of the things that you can put down in a life review. I'm going to move on now to goodbye letters. And oops, I got a typo in here. I see that. It's a series, it should say, of written goodbye letters left behind after your death to acknowledge loved ones, say thank you, apologize, forgive, address other kinds of tasks. It provides lasting words of wisdom and comfort for resolution of peace in your family. And your memorable words and letters remain for current loved ones and future generations. That's, very important. Again, the template was at the bottom of the Zoom message, and it will be on the Kemp Mill Village website. But there's a template of 7 tasks. There's a guide for writing goodbye letters, and I'll show some of them in a minute. Capture sentiments in writing for those not comfortable speaking those words. We all know people who are not chatty. They only say something when they're directly addressed. Sometimes leaving a love letter basically for a family member puts into words all those things you were feeling. And it really makes a difference at a funeral or even later on when somebody opens, your package of documents like your will and gets this letter, hey, to Charlie or to Susan, and a really sweet letter from the one departed. It captures those sentiments and may help settle unresolved issues. It leaves something behind in your own words. And again, we talk about writing them, but some people aren't good at writing. You can record it and leave somebody a recording, if you're not good at writing. But sometimes hearing that voice in a recording also is wonderful, as well as seeing the words written down. Here are some types of goodbye letters. When you think about acknowledgement, I'm so proud of you for. This could go to all your kids. It could go to your priest or rabbi, reverend at your church. It could go to a student you had, whatever. Think about remembrances. Reflect on a fond memory. You and I had so many laughs together at the picnic, the family reunion, whatever that might be. Apologizing. Please forgive me. I'm sorry for the time I said such and such a thing. People sometimes are left with, I never was able to get that apology out there to somebody, and now it's too late. They're gone. And forgiving somebody, let it go, as the song from Frozen says. Hey, I forgive you. Sometimes, get over it and move on. What a lovely memory to leave somebody that they know that even though they hurt you, you have forgiven them. When you think about gratitude, saying thank you for taking me on the outings or for being a good friend or something like that. Your love letters, I love you so much, and you've been my best friend and golfing buddy, or those kinds of things are wonderful to have left for someone. And then goodbye. Josh, I wish you and your family happy lives, or Mina, I know your drive and hard work will take you far. Just to give them that little oomph that might be a good send off, but know that you've always, even from the other side of the grave, wish them well. When you think about planning it, think about the type you want to leave. Is it written while you're healthy or while you're ill? Sometimes you're saying, I'm in a different frame of mind now. It kind of piggyback on, again, Chris's comment. You don't have to wait till you're senior to do this. If you're healthy, why not write some of those letters now? Because you never know what tomorrow might bring. And wouldn't it still be nice to have those letters, even if you're a younger person at this point? Come get your list of people, make your draft, review it, edit it, revise as needed. Sometimes you've apologized to somebody in person. Maybe you don't need to leave the letter. Or you can, you say, I'm doubling down, I'm gonna tell you, and I'm gonna leave it to you in writing. And then print it and put it in a safe place with your other important documents. So again, some people hand out these letters early. In other cases, it's one of those things that's part of the package of inheritance left to that next generation or those remaining. And remember, it doesn't have to be perfect. This is you talking. Make it conversational if possible. Use, sometimes families have words like "bubby" or words that you use in the family that really mean that, man, that came from my Nana, because those are the words she used all the time. It doesn't have to be a tome or something written in perfect English. Just write it. And sometimes having all those errors in it really says, yep, that's just how she sounded or just how he sounded can make a difference. When we talk about our pros and cons again, we've got that framework for you in the attachments in the Zoom thing. Acknowledges people, expresses your feelings. It can write some unresolved issues, rights or slights. It can offer peace and comfort. Says, thank you, I forgive you, I'm sorry, I love you, goodbye, and passes your words on to family, friends, and future generations to cherish. I'll give you an example. My maternal grandmother, I've never met. She was long gone before I was born. And my cousin came across a letter that she had written my aunt, my mother's sister, basically, and just sharing little light things, fun things, but having something in her handwriting, her words. It's the only document that the family has of my maternal grandmother's writing. We have nothing else. And boy, does that make a difference. She's passed it, my cousin's passed it around to everybody. It's a wonderful document to have. On the con side, just like we said earlier, unpleasant situations arise. Others may wish those words were expressed while you were alive to tell them. That's a regret. Nothing, can be done, but it could be a problem. You could need to write more letters than you anticipated. And this could be a good thing or maybe a challenge for people. Even when it's done, some recipients may still be sad, resentful, or upset. You can't fix it, but you've tried. And if you think you aren't a good writer, you might feel like it's not right. It still, again, it makes a difference even if it's not perfect. And it can be very sensitive and emotional exercise. Even as Hedy and Andy were talking, as you're thinking about your life, it can make a lot of other emotions come out that maybe you weren't always prepared for. So sometimes you can do a little bit and you might have to come back later after you've collected yourself. Wrong way, sorry. Okay, some resources. Montgomery College offers writing classes of all sorts, and you can pick up all kinds of non-credit courses that help people write their memoirs, write their goodbye letters, help them write in general. We've got all kinds of writing groups in the area. I said I belong to a small group, and we love it. And we read each other's writings all the time. There are masterclass sessions on this, so you can check out some of those things by just doing some Google searches. And then here are a couple of internet searches that I've found that I thought had some good information on them. The Legacy Project, Positive Psychology, and StoryCorps are a couple. In Bethesda, there's an organization called the Writing Center, and they encourage writers of all stripes to come in. gone through a couple of their sessions to listen to people reading out poetry or reading their memoir, sections of their memoirs or whatever they're doing, and they're a good source. I think it was again Chris mentioning the Stanford University Friends and Family Project template. Again, it was sent with the Zoom announcement. And that has a lot of good leading things to help you frame the task of writing your goodbye letters, for example. And then some books. Memory Makes Family scrapbooks, Yesterday, Today, and Tomorrow. My Life an Open Book, and to our children's children by preserving family histories for generations to come. So those are a couple of things. I'm going to hold up once we get back to my screen. You can see me a little bit better. I'll show up you the My Life book that I've been working on for years, I may add, because I'll tackle it for a bit and then kind of have to take a break from it. So in closing, give it a try. Get started. You'll be glad you did. And thank you. And I'm open to questions at this point from anybody. I'll stop sharing and just come back to good old me.
Beautiful, Beth. That was really nice. I enjoyed that.
Thank you. Thank you.
I want to just mention something along the same lines for people who are afraid of writing or don't want to get something out on paper. There's a website that it's free, at least for 6 months. It's called Megilla.com, MEGILLA.com. And it has all these prompts for exactly the same thing: your life story, your ethical wills, all these things. And you click on this on your cell phone, and then a video starts up, and you have 3 minutes to record your answer. And then it's uploaded to the web, and it stays there. And then your family can have access to that, and you can listen to all of your tapes personally. And it's just very easy and simple to do.
Fabulous. Thank you, Stuart. And I want to get hold up, and those who've got the gallery screen, this is the My Life book that I am working on. And it's got pages of things that you can fill in. But, it's a lot of times it's a prompt, on, I'll just grab one right quick. What are the words that you would constantly repeat to yourself that gave you courage or encouragement? What were those words? For example, that's one. Or they had, when I was a teenager, I used to do blank. And so it talks about some of the fun. Dance, or I used to skateboard, or I used to do gymnastics, whatever. Again, your family doesn't necessarily know you as a young person. They only know you as the senior or as the grown-up. And so sharing some of those can be fun. Yes, Chris.
Thanks so much, Bev. That was very, very good and interesting. I had a few quick points. One is that I've read that there's strong evidence that children who know a lot about their family history are stronger and grittier and more resilient. So that's another reason to write a memoir, is because the more your children apparently know about their history and know what happened to a great-great-grandfather who crossed the Atlantic, the stronger they're going to be. That's one point. Second point is that I just want to endorse your recommendation to the writing center. I think it's called the Writers Center, actually, the Writers Center.
It is the Writers Center, yes.
Yeah, the Writers Center. And in fact, I teach a course there on writing memoirs, and it's very, very, the place is very, very good, so I recommend it. And then the final question, Bev, is I'm not a member of this village. I'm a member of another village, the Bethesda Metro Village. You mentioned there's going to be material on the website, but Barbara, I don't think I can, and as a non-member of your village, can I access that material?
Yes, you can. Yes, just like you registered for the class.
Yes.
You just registered for this class, you can go to that same site, you click on it. We're not keeping it to just members only.
Okay, I'm putting our website URL into the chat right now.
Oh, good. I was just going to ask that. Thank you, Barbara.
And then, yeah, you could, we have all of the events did virtually all of them, and our materials plus the slide to which I'll send to our admin person later will be available, so anybody can click on it. This will be the recording, and my slide deck will be there too.
Yes. We have recordings of previous sessions we've had over these last year and a half. We all had to adapt Zoom. We had our last in-person session was at the Wheaton Library last February, a year ago February. So we've had several Zoom, and we've gotten better at this in terms of sharing screen and learning how to use Zoom. We've all gotten better at this.
Someone had asked,
yes, go ahead.
someone had asked a question about, can you share where I keep my written memoirs?
That's
and
it,
so
right.
forth?
Mm-hmm.
I used to be a proposal writer for government solicitations. So I'm great for keeping documents up on in folders on my computer. And I back up everything onto one of those thumb drives or hockey puck size ones. So I keep it there. I'm not a fan of the cloud right now. That's just me personally. I'd rather have something that I have access to, because I don't know where this cloud business is going. So I'm more comfortable with having something tangible. As far as my life is the book piece that I was showing earlier, up in the screen, this thing. My mother had started one for her, and she didn't finish it before she passed. But I have her copy, and I have my copy of my own book that I've told my niece and nephew where it is. I keep all these things in a metal file cabinet along with my will, and I have copies of certain things in my safe deposit box. So I'm trying to make sure, for a person who still likes to touch and feel paper and stuff, that it's in a bunch of different spots.
I can also, and keep it's as somewhat tangential, but we were talking about.
I can't hear you, Barb.
Oh, sorry. Okay, are we better?
Yep.
When you were talking about those things that we can't access anymore because the people who could have told us are gone. My husband and I have been sucked into Ancestry recently, and there are things that you can find out through Ancestry that you wouldn't because you can't ask anymore. There's an amazing wealth of material there now that wasn't even there 5 or 10 years ago. Military records and stuff. I'm getting some clues. A little bit more than we could have known before. So that's one way to do this. This is better. Leaving these, doing these written documents is so much better. But if you don't have access to that, that's one other thing. The Ancestry stuff is good. Yeah, it helps.
And Chris was saying this whole thing about knowing your family history helps younger people and new generations understand that they come from a resilient family. My own experience, since coming as an African American, I don't have a lot of history on how far back the family goes because the records aren't there. But we talk about, during tough times in my life, I've said, something, Beverly, your ancestors were able to make the Middle Passage, get here, survive slavery, who knows what. And all you're fussing about is this crummy little bill or this illness or what. Get a grip, woman. This is nothing. If you come from people who survived, and all of us have family stories like this, you've survived, that family has lived through, any family in the world has lived through famine, war, homelessness, all kinds of things. So you say to yourself, I come from resilient people, even if I don't know who they are.
Yeah.
And that will help me get through this.
Yeah.
Terrific.
I'm enjoying the note that Rosalie left in the chat, which says, she says to her kids, to my dears, I give you two things. I give you roots, I give you wings. Rosalie, that's beautiful. It's really beautiful. Thank you for that. Do we have any other questions or any other comments here? All right. If you think of something, we have lots of thank yous here too, which is also wonderful. This has been a terrific program. And I thank our presenters and thank you all for coming. And I will tell you kind of like, save the date. When we were talking about saving this, this information with your important documents, with our next program, June 17th, save the date, is going to be about the advanced directives, advanced kinds of legal documents that you should have so that your children don't have to struggle with a will or trying to figure out what you're intending for. So Karen Fear's husband, who is also an elder lawyer in Montgomery County, is going to do that presentation, and we're looking forward to it. So there'll be more information coming out soon. We'll have a flyer.
And Barbara, on that comment, here's a book I want to recommend to all of you. At Peace. Can you see that? At Peace. I don't know how many of you know this book, written by Samuel Harrington, Choosing a Good Death After a Long Life. It's an excellent book. I recommend it.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, this has been a great audience and this has been a great presentation. Thank you very much. All right, and we hope that you'll be able to join us in June.
Thank you.
Bye.
Wonderful presentations. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you.
All right, bye.
Bye-bye.